What is going on, snooker fans, and welcome to the first Snooker Digest episode of this brand new season. It's already upon us. Like I said in my predictions video last season, doesn't really feel like we've had much of a break since the last season finishing and a new one beginning. But that's just the way snooker works. The past few years, we don't get much of a summer. You just finish in spring, and then by June, July, you're back into the new season. And look, we started with a really big tournament, the Shanghai Masters, one of the oldest tournaments on the snooker calendar. Certainly in terms of China, Shanghai Masters and the China Open, those have been the two sort of flagship tournaments for the country. And, I talked about this tournament last season, and I talked about how much I preferred it as a ranking event. But it really is prestigious as sort of China's version of the Masters. Top 16 players with wildcards in there as well. And you could feel the prestige. There was a really good turnout in terms of audiences last week, which was really promising. Sometimes we go to events in China and the turnout isn't amazing. It was fantastic all week. The tournament really felt great. The first real snooker that I properly got into this season, and I loved every minute of it. Obviously being in China, the time difference isn't always fantastic with work. So most of the matches I was catching up with when I got back from work. So some really good matches, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly go through the tournament and pick out sort of key players and key moments and what it could mean for the rest of the season. Starting with Kyren Wilson, this was his first, real match as the reigning world champion. He did play at the Championship League. I don't really count that. This was a real sort of the first real test of his world title defence, the first season as a world champion for him. And let's be honest, it could have gone a little bit better than losing 6-0. But, I'm certainly not going to read too much into that result. It's not easy being a first-time world champion. We've seen it with pretty much every player in recent history that's won the world championship for the first time. There's this additional spotlight and additional sort of aura that you have to live up to. And, it didn't obviously work out for him this time around, but I certainly think he's going to be a fantastic ambassador for the game. I think he's going to be a fantastic world champion. He may win some titles as well here and there, who knows. But if he needed one, this could have been a bit of a bump back to reality for him after the massive high he would have been on in May. But Zhao Yilong, he obviously beat him. Worth focusing on him a little bit because last season he had a really good first half of the season. I think that was highlighted mainly by the UK Championship quarterfinal that he reached. And it is worth pointing out that he is currently ranked 23rd in the rankings. So he's not an awful long way off being in the top 16. And if he can get sort of consistent runs of form going again, like he'd done towards sort of October, December time last year, then he could certainly be in with a crack of getting into the top 16 for potentially the Masters, potentially the World Championship. Obviously, he didn't do much after this result, but certainly a fantastic result for him. Also worth looking at Ronnie O'Sullivan. Obviously, he's been such a dominant force in this tournament, having won the previous 4 instalments of the Shanghai Masters, and was on a 21-match unbeaten run in this tournament before being completely outclassed by Judd Trump in the semi-finals. Much like last season, I suspect it won't be the only time we see these two lock horns in the business end of big tournaments this season. He didn't do an awful lot wrong in that loss to Judd Trump. He made some, fairly basic errors here and there, but he was brutally punished. And even if he was playing well, it would have taken a massive effort to beat Judd Trump in that kind of form. Mark Selby, really great to see him back playing well so soon into the new season. After all the talk last spring about how he was falling out of love with the game and had put some, serious consideration into packing it in altogether. He looked much better out in Shanghai, but the downside was letting a 6-2 and an 8-5 lead slip in the semis to lose against Shaun Murphy. And he'll have to hope that won't have sort of an early scar on him as he looks to start winning big titles again this year. Speaking of Murphy, really good performances last week from him in Shanghai. I talked a little bit about him in my predictions video last week. I talked about how much work he'd been putting in over the summer, and that, clearly showed last week. just ultimately he came up against someone playing practically untouchable snooker in the final. And the only concern for Shaun Murphy will be, he got off to the absolute perfect start last season. He won the Championship League, the first tournament of the season. But then after that, he failed to get past the last 16 of any further ranking event of the season. He got to a semi-final and a quarter-final of invitational events, but that was it. And, he is currently projected to finish the season outside of the top 16. So we'll need that extra bit of consistency, and he's going to need the performances that he put in last week to continue throughout the season. This can't just be a one-off. But yeah, certainly promising signs for him to get to the final and play really good stuff reaching that final as well. And, if you can't get confidence coming back from, 6-2 down and 8-5 down against someone like Mark Selby, then you never will. But as so often was the case last season, there is only one man to talk about, and that is Judd Trump. His first win at the Shanghai Masters from 4 finals that he's reached there over his career. And look, I'd done a lot of these videos last season when I was reviewing tournaments, and let's face it, the majority of the time I was reviewing a Judd Trump win. And the thing that, struck me last season was Judd's, obviously he played well, but he never really played that breathtaking A game that he has. He always sort of played at a consistent level that was good enough to get him through the majority of matches. And then when he became, under a little bit of pressure, he managed to find an extra gear or two that he needed to win matches. But last week was just about as amazing as you'll ever see someone play to win a tournament. In 4 matches, he made 10 centuries and a further 50 plus breaks. And I say 50 plus breaks, most of them were in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s. Every time he got in, he scored. He scored savagely. And, nobody got remotely close to him all week. And to do that against the caliber of opposition that he was up against shows already that he will be, again, the standards that the rest of the tour will need to match in order to win any silverware this season. Another little bonus from just how well Judd was scoring is that he's now on career 989 centuries, just 11 away from making 1,000 in his career. John Higgins actually should worth mentioning that John is on 998, so he's only 2 away from that landmark and will make it very soon. But Judd, he could make that landmark some 9 years younger than Ronnie O'Sullivan did. Now, of course, Judd's benefited from the fact that he's been playing in much more tournaments than O'Sullivan got the chance to in the early stages of his career. But to get to 1,000 at such a young age is an incredible feat. I know he would have loved to have done it last season at the World Championship. And there was a point last season where it did look likely that he would be able to. But nonetheless, he's going to make that achievement within the next couple of months. And the sky's the limit in terms of Judd and the records he could make. He's definitely going to finish his career with more centuries. At some point O'Sullivan will retire. I know O'Sullivan's 250 ahead of him. So, Judd's going to have the legs to make more centuries. He's probably going to end up with the most overall titles. The only question with Judd is, can he win, more World Championships, more Masters, more UK Championships? And, I'm slightly regretting making my prediction video before watching Judd because, obviously things can change and it's very early in the season, but he does look really good. And you watch him like that and you just think you'd be so surprised if he doesn't pick up one of the 3 majors later this season. Obviously, snooker doesn't work that way. There are, an incredible roster of players that he has to beat, and form will go up and down throughout the season. And I suppose one thing with Judd is, towards the end of last season, when you looked at him at the Tour Championship and you looked at him at the World Championship, he did kind of seem like he'd just run out of steam. Getting to the quarterfinal at the Crucible is no mean feat, but he never really produced there. He kind of just about got through to the quarterfinals and then lost to Jack Jones. And you kind of wonder whether he just managed to sort of run out of steam towards the end there. And it will be interesting to see if he maybe changes his approach this season. Maybe he takes more breaks throughout the season to try and gear himself up for the Triple Crown events. Personally, I don't think he will, just because he's the kind of guy that wants to play in absolutely everything, and he wants to win everything, whether that's a smaller tournament in, say, like Northern Ireland or Scotland, or whether it's the Triple Crown events. He will be hungry to win whatever comes in front of him. And he doesn't really take offence to the fact that he's not won as many majors as perhaps fans and pundits believe that he should have done. But yeah, regardless of all of that, incredible week from Judd Trump. And yeah, this is definitely not going to be the first and last video that I make of him this season winning a tournament. And yeah, really, those were the main talking points from last week. And because of the sort of stop-start nature of the snooker season, you kind of get fully invested into a tournament like this, and then you look at a calendar and you're like, okay, there's going to be a bit of a break now. The next snooker that's going to be coming up will be qualifiers. I think we've got 3 sets of qualifiers coming up. But then we've got a brand new tournament out in China towards the middle of August. And then when you're into September, that's when the snooker starts coming thick and fast. I think there's like the English Open and the British Open and some more qualifiers. So no, plenty to get our teeth stuck into in about the next sort of 5 or 6 weeks. But for now, incredible start to the season for Judd Trump. And like I say, he is going to be the man to beat for the rest of the season.